All right, let's take a look at the numbers in the NHL. The NHL has a $68.3 million luxury tax threshold. Now, keep in mind, the NHL just instituted a salary cap several years ago. Their floor is $48.3 million. Obviously, there aren't the numbers that there are spending in the NFL. Contracts are guaranteed, however. The difference between the high and the low is $20 million. So think about that. The difference between the high and the low in the NHL is $20 million. The difference in the NFL proposed right now is $15 million, and you're talking about $120 or $30 million cap in the NFL with a $48 to $68 million cap in the NHL. So it's a bigger difference in the NHL with less than half of what the cap is. But when you look at the growth rate, you look at the operating income growth rate, you see that they're almost even in the NHL. Chris, can you explain the significance of those numbers, the growth rate, and then the operating income growth rate? What the significance of those numbers mean?
The operating income is really the profit. So if you're talking about the growth rate, it's top of the revenue they're coming in, and the operating income is really how much cash they're making. So if you put the two together, if there's a wide differential one way or the other, it keeps it, you can sort of see the health of the league, like when you look at the NBA numbers. The NHL, you're looking at, it's about equal, so you could say this is a pretty darn healthy league moving forward, and if things stay on the same path, I mean, that's not a league you really will worry about.
And that's the league of all the four right now that has more labor certainty. They have a CBA that's signed through the next 2 seasons. When we look at the other sports, the NFL, of course, is in a lockout right now. The NBA, which we'll get to in a second, is, locked out right now as of 2011. And Major League Baseball actually only has 1 year left on their CBA. So could you make the argument that when you add everything up, the cost structure, the growth rate, the fact that hockey's popularity, you could pull all kinds of stats, has grown or stayed steady now in the last few years, that they are, while football might be the best business right now, that more people care about, that the NHL is pretty damn stable right now?
Absolutely. I think they're extremely stable, and unfortunately, you can also make the argument that their lockout sort of led to this.
Okay, now let's get to the NBA and the numbers in particular and why they are in such bad shape. So their salary cap is pretty much the same at the top as the NHL, $69 million. Their salary floor is $44 million, less than the floor of the NBA. Yes, of the NHL. Yes, they have guaranteed contracts. Yes, they have less players. Most teams have 15 guys under contract at one time during the season, 12 on their active roster. $25 million, the difference between the high and the low. But when you look at the growth rate, the lowest of all the four sports, and when you look at the operating income growth rate, a minus 7.7%. They're in a lockout. They do have a rookie wage scale that's slotted by pick. What number there stands out the most to you, Chris, that tells us why basketball is in such bad shape?
Well, it's really the operating income number, and if you really look at it, I think it's a lot because there's a lot less NBA teams than in the other sports that own their own arenas. I think that's a major contributing factor. That and the fact they're much more reliant on basically ticket revenue for their overall income than any other sport, because they don't have a lot of local sponsorships because they don't own the arenas and whatnot. And I think that's really, that plus the player salaries is really causing them to be in a hole. And I still believe there probably won't be a season because they're in a lot of trouble right now in terms of, if you believe their numbers, they're losing a lot of money.
Well, and that's the question about the believability of the numbers. While people have given credit to the NBA owners for, to a degree, quote unquote, opening their books, they're not sure that the numbers are all that accurate, that they're pumping them up to make their side look worse than it is.
Yeah, and not everybody, not all these teams have the same kind of deal as Celtics have here locally, which I can't go into detail, but they have a fantastic lease deal, and I don't blame them for keeping it. The other question is, just like you said, do you really believe the numbers that they're out there, whether it's the Wall Street Journal article or some of the other things that are there? I don't know. The numbers I have say they're losing money, but I'm beginning to take a second look and saying, well, where do these really come from?